Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I have Donna here, and she is an international spiritual intelligence method coach, helping people with a burning desire to achieve their dreams, yearning for more abundance while maintaining harmony in their lives and seeking the path to prosperity without compromising their health and relationships. And she specializes in helping you unlock the secrets of spiritual intelligence, making it easier than ever to empower your dreams. And I really wanted her to come on to help us talk about relationships, especially as business owners. That's probably the thing that holds us back the most, is the fact that we have issues in our own relationships. How can we have those conversations? How can we make sure that those relationships stay strong so we can continue to grow our business and also find that balance or that harmony between relationships and everything? But before we get into that, Donna, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Philip. It is a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, excited to have you. And like I mentioned, you're talking about relationships and everything. I think it's something that we really should talk about. And I believe that communication is a huge aspect of that. And like I said, having that supportive spouse or really getting that spouse on board with the business is something that's very important to really help the business move forward. Not that it can't if the spouse isn't on board or the communication isn't quite there, but it definitely makes things, especially life and business, a lot easier if you have them on board or at least an understanding of what you're trying to do with the business and everything. So looking forward to diving into that. But tell us more about you. I know it's a broad open statement, but tell us more about you. What got you into what you do and how exactly you help people.
Sure. I have been coaching and mentoring predominantly women, but people for over 30 years. And in the beginning, we didn't really call it coaching. That's been a
Mm,
new word that has really surfaced probably in the last 15 years or
okay.
so, that it's gotten bigger. But learning in the beginning, it was something that I just found myself doing. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said, "I've never told anybody this," um, I'd be quite wealthy. And so it's learning to in the beginning, I think that we don't often recognize what our gifts are. We talk about you talked about harmony, but harmony starts first with me.
Mm,
Harmony starts first with me being authentic and recognizing what lights me up and what is causes me to be enthusiastic and passionate about my work that I'm doing. A lot of times my husband worked for UPS for 30 years, and I would not say that that got him excited every morning when he got up. And so, how do you sometimes do that and still maintain the relationships is another question. Is how do you get up every day when you're not enthusiastic? And so there's some of that, probably both in the audience, people doing things that they absolutely love, and then people doing things that perhaps is not your primary passion that you live. So the first step is what's important to you
mm.
and really doing a self inventory. I call this awareness. It's like, where have I been? Where am I want to go? What are my gifts? I call it creating your map. Creating a blueprint is another word that I use to describe. And first, we need to start with awareness of what's important to me. So, if you happen to be in a marriage relationship or some type of a relationship like that, where that is important to you, communicating that that's important, even uh, if your boss tells you have to work late, or you have to come in early, or you have to miss a kid's soccer game, which happened to us. We have family plans, and he says, "Nope, we've had when my husband was in security, we've had a theft at UPS. You've got to come and investigate it. I don't really care what you had planned. Drop everything, and
Mm.
you're coming into work." And that happened a lot. And so, but communicating with me what his true values were helped us to move through those periods of times. So, first step is awareness of what you want. What are your values? And what is important to you? Harmony is a much better word than balanced, even though I use that in my Balanced Blueprint Academy. Harmony is a better word because balance makes me think that you get 50% and you get 50%, or everybody
Yeah.
gets 25%. And it's really not like that. It's working from values, and sometimes work calls you in. But that does not mean that I have less or I have a project or something. It does not mean that my husband is not important to me. This is taking time right now. And so that harmony is I love the word much better, even though we all say, I want to have a balanced life. And so that's why I called it the Balanced Blueprint, because it does resonate. But if you want to arrive in Chicago, you need to know where you're starting from. And
Mhm.
thinking about where am I and really being honest with yourself. How are you doing in your marriage? How are you doing in your health, your personal health? How are you doing in other outside relationships? How are you doing in your spiritual life? What is important to you? All of those pieces and parts of you, how are they going? Rate them periodically. And then you make adjustments. I'm really into quarterly goals, not annual goals, even though we all need the annual goals, because I can adjust. I'm
Mhm.
moving um, a ship, if you will, and it's degrees. And we often underestimate what those little small decisions, they actually create miracles. One decision after another decision after another decision can create miraculous results. But we don't often think so because it doesn't feel big in that.
Yeah.
So, what's your thoughts about that?
No, I completely agree with you. And there's so many things I think about. One with like that 1 degree, and I don't know the whole analogy, but it's like if
Mhm.
you're going from LA to New York
Mhm.
and you go off by like 1 degree, you end up somewhere else, and it's like way different. But it
Like
was only
China
one
or something.
degree. Yeah, yes, yeah, maybe not that far, but yeah, you end up way far off from going to New York and everything. So that 1 degree is so important. But I couldn't help but think about, and I've shared this before. It's been a while since I shared it, but whenever my wife and I were dating at the time, and I had this problem with relationships where I would kind of bring up about how religion was important and stuff to me, but I would never say like, I would never be like super forthcoming about it or very direct about it. If it was just like, oh, it's important for me, I kind of do it, but then I just wouldn't really bring it up too much in the relationship because I didn't want to make it be like a pain point or anything like that, or make it uncomfortable. But then basically every relationship would just end. And sometimes it would be before religious stuff would come up, but a lot of times it because of a misalignment that was
Mhm.
there that I definitely knew from the start, but they didn't necessarily know. And so it seemed like this whole thing and I don't know their perspective because we just broke up and moved on. We didn't talk to each
Mhm.
other, but I'm sure they probably felt like, well, I'm not meeting, it's an unmet expectation that I'm not meeting for Philip. And that
Mhm.
was similar with my wife, but we had talked about it and I was direct about it. And then she started not really going to church with me. And so at first I'm like, well, this isn't working out. But then I'm like, well, let me have that conversation with her. Let me let her know again, here's where I'm at. Here's what I need and what I expect. And she did want that. She just didn't realize what I meant by that. Because I had said something about like, I want I want to raise a family that goes to church and stuff like that. Which when I say just goes to church, does that mean once a month, once a year? Like, what does that mean? So I had to be more specific, like, going very, every week and stuff like that. And so when I had that conversation, it was that, and actually expressed that expectation, the relationship got better there. And of course, now we're married and everything, but it was almost to the point where it's like, I think this isn't going to work out.
Mhm.
But prior to her, it was this kind of unmet expectation. It was this idea that, like, yeah, I want somebody that goes to church, that does the things, whatever else was in there. But I never fully expressed those things. So therefore, and part of it, I just didn't know exactly for me either.
Yeah.
A lot of it was I was more focused on the physical appearance because I was really
Mhm.
into fitness and everything as well. And I was like, oh, church is a thing, but the physical appearance was a higher priority on
Mhm.
my list until I finally had that self reflection. And I think
Mhm.
it's important that you mentioned that self reflection, that you need to do that and figure out yourself first. And going to, like, again, with the annual goals you talked about too, knowing where you're trying to go, now you can create those quarterly goals, or even at a minimum having those quarterly goals, and you can make those adjustments because, going back to the flight analogy, if I'm now veering towards China instead of New York, well, I probably need to adjust to make sure I'm going towards New York. You know where you're going,
Yeah.
but that all starts with you, knowing what you want, getting your own internal house in order, and then you can start to have the conversations with a spouse or business partner or whatever it is. But you have to know what you want first, and to be able to fight and have a conversation at a minimum. Maybe not fight. Fight might not be a good word, but to be able to have a conversation and discuss about why you expect this thing or why you want this thing and everything, and having those important things and stuff like that, and just to be able to start that conversation. But you have to know you first. So I agree with you.
I think the biggest thing of what I heard you say is you told her why.
Yeah.
You didn't just tell her, you need to go to church every week with me, because that's not the way you said it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but you could have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But you told her why it was important to you. And having that conversation with people, I think we have in general, we have a fear of telling people really what we want for a fear of rejection or breaking, something not going well. And it's the same thing even with serving people. I really don't call it sales. But serving people is the same thing as I should have the uh give myself permission to say, no, this isn't the right person for me to work with.
Yeah.
Or yes, it is. And really saying who I am and who I serve and what I want, what I'm wanting to myself, first of all, like you're saying, so
Yeah.
that we can have that authentic. And as you go on in your marriage, how long have you been married?
5 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Really long time.
Next week, I am celebrating 40. So,
Wow, that's a very long time. You don't hear a lot of that anymore. Yeah.
so in that period of time, what's important to me shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And having those continual conversations of saying what I wanted. One of my husband and I, we've got lots of marriage stories. We've had a business. I've had a business since I was 19. So I've always been doing something. And so we've had a lot of experiences together and now a laughing experiences. Not all of them were at the time. But we were coming home from church and he says, "Do you want to go out to eat?" And I knew money was just a little bit tight, so I'm like, I'll just have a salad. I'll just go home and have a salad. I didn't want a salad. I wanted Mexican. But I didn't tell him what I wanted. And it ended up being a whole afternoon grumpy thing because he didn't take me for Mexican when I didn't ask for Mexican.
Yeah. Didn't say it at all. You said it in your head, though. He should have read your mind.
He should have known it.
How dare he?
He should have known when I said I just will have a salad that I didn't really want a salad, but I didn't tell him like that. He heard, I'll have a salad. And so, it's just all of this goes on, and it happens in every relationship where we assume people understand, or we assume people know, or this is another one. We have some kind of expectation about how they're supposed to behave, but we've never told them what we're expecting.
Yes, I found unmet expectations, or known expectations, rather, that are unmet because of that.
Yes,
are typically that's usually what I get in trouble with. Whether it's my wife having it's unknown for me what her expectation is, or vice versa. Right. That tends to be more of our arguments than the fact that we know the expectation of the other.
Absolutely. So be bold enough to ask is my advice.
Yeah.
Be bold enough to say, not in a grumpy way and not a slamming doors cupboard way, even though I've done that. But saying, I want Mexican today. Do you think we can have it in our budget to do that? And just saying. And if we both decide, no, we better go home and make lunch, then we do that. But it's like learning to be able to say what we want. This is not necessarily business related, but can I tell you one other story?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So my husband and I have had this conversation. We've been married a while. We were together before marriage. So we've been together a good, most of our adult life. And he still has trouble getting his socks all the way into his laundry, the hamper for it to be washed.
Yeah,
And
that
so
hamper, it's a tricky thing, I
it's a
tell you.
trick. And so um, for anybody who wants to check me out, I had a traumatic childhood and everything, and that creates a lot of low self-esteem. We'll just summarize in saying that. And so I remember early on in our marriage, and I'm like, I see the socks. He's gone to work. I see the socks. I'm home with 3 children. All the things. All the things are going on. Fighting and toys and dirty diapers and all the things. And I see these socks and I'm like, he can't even get the socks into the hamper. If he really loved me, now listen to this statement. If he really loved me, he'd put those socks in the hamper, but he must think I'm his maid. He doesn't really care. And I stew on this all day long. Now, can you imagine what it's like when he comes in the door? He didn't know what he's done. We do not have a good evening. Okay, that's one scenario, and that happened. Another scenario is God talked to me and taught me a lot. And I began to learn, and I said, I'm like, he didn't put the socks in the hamper. How many ways does he show me he loves me every day? And I began to list them. He does this, he does this, he does this, he's working hard. He does all of these other things to show me he loves me. Wow, I'm really a blessed woman. And I pick up the socks and put them in the hamper. And I go on about my day. Now, do you think we have a better evening? And all that
I would say so.
changed was my perspective. I'm the one who changed. He still has trouble getting them in the hamper. But I didn't create the meaning that meant XYZ. I began to create the meaning that of all of the other things that he did to show me he loves me. And learning to do that in our expectations in business, in life, you can look at it in all kinds of ways, is what our expectations are. We're the ones who make the biggest shift, which is at the core of spiritual intelligence, is you are the creator of your world. You are the creator of your experience. What do you want to create today? As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So my first story, I was an unloved wife. And my second story, in the other story, I was absolutely cherished and adored. And the only person who changed was my perspective on what I chose to believe, think, and meditate on. And it created a whole new world.
Yeah, and like you said, that experience at dinner that night when he got home was better for him. I'm sure he loved that side of you way more. And then for you as well, like you felt so much better because rather than being so mad all day long in this negative mindset and then come home and now I'm sure as you were negative and kind of hateful towards him or regretting him and not feeling loved by him, that was being shown. And so then therefore he's like, I don't really want to show her love because she's not showing me love. And we kind of get childish with it, but that's just natural as humans that we do that. And I can't help, I've got a sock story too. My wife, she does the laundry, so it's not like it kills me. But every once in a while, I try and help her out with that and stuff, and I'll give her a hard time because mainly she does the laundry. But she's told me, she's like, "Oh my gosh, I love you so much," because when I take my socks off, I take them off, and the outside is still on the outside, and for some reason, she just decides to grab them from the top and pull it through, and so the inside is out. And then she's got to go and put them all back in. She does the same thing with her shirts and everything. She's like, "I'm just so thankful that you don't do that." I'm like, yeah, I want to be like, yeah, because I'm not a freak. No, I'm like, yeah, you're welcome. I love you too. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know why that's such a good compliment or like it's a compliment, but whatever. But I couldn't help but think about that. But I just think about that unmet expectation in the workforce as well, where that comes up, or you expect somebody to do something a certain way or get something done by a certain time, and you just say, hey, I need you to get this done. Okay. Well, you didn't set it. You didn't set a deadline. You didn't tell me how important it was. I had other things going on, so I decided, either okay, I'll get to it when I get to it, which means it's probably at the bottom of my list now. I don't know the importance behind it. I don't know when you need it,
Mhm.
so I'm going to get it done. But now you're mad because I didn't get it done in time, and which really,
Mhm.
I could say that with the trash. I'm sure there's other
Mhm.
men listening to this right now. If my wife wants me to get the trash out now, but I'll just
Mhm.
say, hey, can you take the trash out? Okay, yeah, I'll get to it. Let me, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. Let me finish this thing up. And of course,
Mhm.
I could have been better saying, yeah, let me finish this up real quick. Or, hey, do you need me to get it out of the way first? I'll raise my hand and say, I'm at fault too. But then she will get mad sometimes because I didn't do it right then. I didn't drop everything and do it in the moment because
Mhm.
she didn't explain her expectation of it.
Right.
And of course, again, I didn't explain what I was doing that I couldn't. I mean, I guess I could, but I didn't ask that question either, which is what you talk about as well. Start to ask the questions, change that perspective. And I like
Mhm.
that you talked about changing that perspective. And so I really want to dive down these two things. I think both of them are equally important. Maybe let's start with the question. Like how can we help ourselves remember to ask questions like that? Because I found like for me with getting better at communication, when somebody asks for something, that I'll ask those questions. Hey, is this important to you? Or when's the deadline on this? I might ask for some clarifying
Mhm.
questions to get a better feel of the importance or when this thing is due. But I've trained myself, and I'm not 100% on this, but I've trained myself to think about that. But then the other aspect of the perspective shift. So I'd love to hear like how you
Yeah.
go about that, and I'm sure you're helping other people with that. But how do you start to ask those questions to get the clarity and understand the expectation instead of just assuming what that expectation is?
Well, just a blanket statement pretty much for all the wives out there. We ask you to do it, it means now. Just saying.
Yeah, love a good stereotype.
If there's any woman out there that disagrees with me, let me know. But I kind of think that and it probably is very similar for a man. If he asks for a specific thing, there is this
Yeah,
thing that
yeah,
I want a cup of coffee now or whatever it is.
yeah,
Those kind of things. So that's kind of understood that it maybe shouldn't be so, but it is. So it becomes on
yeah.
our part to say, is it all right if I finish doing XYZ and then
Mhm.
do it? And that kind of is beginning to communicate. So that's in the home life is just um understanding and asking those kind of questions as we go along. I had that happen today. I asked my husband at breakfast to do something and he went and did something else, so I did it. And he called me later. He goes, "I forgot to do that." And I'm like, "Don't worry, it's done." But thank you for
Yeah.
calling and remembering. And so it happened this morning, and I'm like, it means now.
Yeah.
But
40
it's
years of marriage and still hasn't
you
figured
just
it out.
know. And so
Yeah.
you just laugh about it and you don't make mountains out of little things. You just
Mhm.
laugh about it and move on. It's no big deal, that kind of thing. In work, it's really important to communicate when your deadlines are, what your expectations are, especially if you're in leadership. If someone's not accomplishing the job, you have to go back to you
Mm.
and ask how you are communicating the expectations, procedures, how you want it done, all of that. There's so many ways. In the old days, we had written policies and procedures and jobs descriptions and all that kind of stuff. And now you can do videos to describe everything you want and communicate it ways. So just always communication. And if you're an employee or someone answering to someone, is always ask. Ask questions. There are no stupid questions. Always ask, and hopefully that's acceptable in in that environment. But um, I'm not sure about this part. When did you want this done? And just beginning to ask those kind of questions to be able to communicate
Yeah.
everybody's expectations. And if something's not going well, is revisiting it and again allowing that communication to occur to, "Oh, you told me that this had to be done by next Tuesday, but I've run into this and this with these suppliers and I can't find the answers to be able to have it done," and communicate that so that
Yeah.
that if I'm answering to you, I've not neglected it, that there has been some hiccups that's come along, and it may take just a little bit longer. I wanted to communicate that with you. Or do you want me to eliminate that and just move on? Do you see? It's like I'm asking those kind of questions
Hmm.
to be able to work through things, and just talking and really saying what's going on is good no matter where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. So such an important thing. I know kind of a funny story, I guess, s- somewhat good, somewhat bad communication. But I know in a previous role that I had, I was working on all these approvals for some equipment we had, and there was different certifications. And so you're going through these government
Mhm,
entities and stuff. So of course, the government, they're fast as can
mhm.
be, and everything just happens very quickly. They would take forever, but I mean, it was like 10 or 15 different approvals. And so I just had a list like, okay, we need to get these. So I just started, I just made a list and started at the top. I didn't have any order. And then I had asked for like, hey, what's the order on this? Is there any importance to my manager? And he kind of pushed back, and he's like, well, they just need to get done. I'm like, yeah, but with talking to these government agencies, they need information. I can get that, but then I'm waiting. So which ones are more important so I can make sure I'm really prioritizing those? And then I guess he had some bad experience with the previous one. He finally brought that up in the conversation, but it was like, well, you just got to get, you need to work on all of them. But I'm like, yeah, but I need to order a priority. So from management saying what's the most important, because otherwise, I'm going based on I created a list and I'm just going top to bottom. And when I can't work on one, I'll go to the next one. But I might put the top priority at the very bottom. And so you're expecting to be done first. So I had to like really draw that out of him for him to understand that. That was some of those things, like a situation I had to go through to really
Mhm.
get the clarity and the expectation, and really the priority of the list and everything. But it was really interesting to hear him kind of he expected me just to work on everything. And then if I didn't, or if he gave me a priority, that I would only focus on that one thing. But I
Yeah.
guess overall the conversation was good, even though there was a lot of assumptions on his side.
Mhm.
At least when I started asking questions, he was at least forthcoming with some of those assumptions and everything. And then I could go and ask more questions or give more
Yep.
information on that
That's a
and
great
everything.
example. Sometimes we ask those kind of questions and they don't know the answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
They haven't really
And I
thought
think
it
that was
through. They
probably
just
part of
gave
it,
you
to be
this whole
honest.
project without
Yeah.
actually thinking it through about what's most important. And so then when you ask,
Yeah.
if I say, "Well, I don't really know," I look stupid.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so sometimes it's like, my favorite thing is because I get teammates that ask my team members who ask me questions I haven't thought of.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "That's a great question. Can you give me a minute to think about what the priority is, and I'll get back to you?" And
Yeah.
just owning it. Like, I hadn't
Yeah.
thought of that question. You asked, that's a great question. And then coming back with it. So doing that as a leader. It's like we think we have to know everything. And the reason I have a team is I don't want to know everything.
Yes. And I was just about to say that as the leader, you shouldn't have to know everything. And so you're not in the weeds, so to
Right.
speak. So sometimes, like, if you've done the role, like you'll probably know a lot of those things. But even then, like, you're not in it on the day to day anymore. Yeah,
Mhm.
you maybe did it in a previous role, and obviously it's your company, so you may have done it when the company was smaller. But now you're not doing it, or a process changed, so you don't know what things. Here's all your information. And even then, we're humans. We don't give every single thing every single time. Actually, I was just talking to a friend about creating a standard operating procedure, an SOP, and I had one of my virtual assistants. I was switching from one virtual assistant to another and
Mhm.
everything, and I had her write an SOP based on the roles that she or functions that she was doing. And I looked it over. I'm like, yeah, this looks pretty good. I think we covered everything. And then the new VA came in, and she's like, hey, well, what about this? And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about
Mhm.
that step because it was assumed knowledge. It's knowledge that I had that the other VA also had. And so it's really hard to write an SOP out from a perspective of somebody that knows nothing. And so same thing with
Mhm.
that leader trying to give you or delegate a task to you. It's hard because they don't know what all you do need to know. So it's a responsibility of that
Mhm.
person underneath them in the ranks to say, hey, I need this, this, and this so I can get my job done. And if need be, give an explanation on that as well. And but leadership also needs to be willing to oh, sorry, I missed that. Let me get back to you on that. Or
Right.
rather than just, oh, well, here's an answer, and then come back later. Why'd you do that? And that's unfortunately where the politics and bureaucracy within big corporations come in. Because then you got to make sure it's documented on email, this, that, and the other. Lots of fun stuff.
Yeah, it's very when you're creating the SOPs and things like that, is creating it as if someone's never done this job before,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get too basic. It's
Yeah.
like click this on the computer.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
really basic on things, because we do assume that people know things that they don't know, or they don't know how we want it done, even if they do
Yeah.
know that. So it is really important to do all of that.
Oh yeah, and I've had to write a procedure for some technical stuff using a Linux operating system. And
Mhm.
when you're in the terminal on Windows, you just do like Control C, and you can copy something, and of course Control V to paste it. Well, in Linux, when you're in the terminal, if you hit Control C, you close the terminal. So you have to hit Control Shift C. So I was having to write those steps on the procedure, and then I would put Control V, and I put an explanation of why Control Shift C and stuff like that. But it was funny, like having to go down to that basic for
Mhm.
the people I was writing this for, and I mean, it's painstaking to get
Yes.
to some of those details sometimes. And I really think that going back to these expectations, sometimes it feels like it's painstaking. Again, with my wife telling me to take out the trash, it feels painstaking to say, I need you to take out the trash right now, or I want you to take out the trash right now. Can you please stop and just do this? It's just easier to say, take the trash out, and then get mad because the expectation wasn't met. But then the other side,
Mhm.
it's also, harder for the other person to say, hey, do you mean right now? Or can I do that when I finish here? Or, hey, let me finish this up and I'll get to that right
Mhm.
after that. It'll be 5 minutes. It's harder to say that instead of, okay, I'll do it. It's just easier to say these things without clearly communicating the expectations.
Mm.
Yeah, so let's shift. So I know we kind of talk about how to ask questions, but the perspective shift. Going back to your sock example, how do you help people, or what would you suggest to people for them to really start working on changing their perspective when they see something, or when something happens to them and expectation isn't met, to change their perspective? And really, to me, it sounded a lot like, let me look at their, like, from their point of view. And like you said with your husband, he loves you. He
Mhm.
does this, and this for you, even if he might not do the socks, which, I mean, he wasn't trying to sabotage your day by any means.
Right.
It wasn't
Right.
malicious. Of
Right.
course, you put that in your mind that he must hate you. So how can we how can we start to change this perspective on unmet expectations?
I mentioned that I was a very insecure bride when
Hmm.
we first married, and if you think about the negative story I told about my perspective on it, it had to do with my self-esteem. And my
Mm.
identity, the way that I saw myself. One of the things that I love to do at Vibrant Living is stop identity theft. And of course, I'm not talking about finances. I'm
Yeah.
talking about all those things that happen to us: failed relationships, failed businesses, disappointments, perhaps a difficult childhood, trauma, all kinds of things create an identity. Whether you mean to or not, your brain will do it. It just does. And so under beginning to look at yourself and the way that you're viewing yourself. And you talked about, you help people public speaking. Well, the same thing is applying, is looking at myself and figuring out what I'm believing about me, because then I can be a better wife, a better business owner, a
Mm.
better person in the world, and making a difference is when I can learn who I truly am, who God created me to be.
Yeah.
What are the gifts that he put in me? What's the purpose for me? Because it's good. His purposes are good. And so discovering that and stepping into that fully and discovering it. One of my mentors said, Donna, you are a gift to the world. And the person who's going to be most surprised is you.
Hmm.
because we don't realize all that's capable in us. We all do minimizing, safe keeping mental activities. And so we don't realize what is possible. And the biggest change is when I got mentors and coaches, because we can't see our own blind spots, because every
Yes.
idea we have is fabulous, right?
Of course. Of
And we're
course.
always right, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so all of that, we don't see those things that are hindering us from being our best, to vibrant living, as I call it.
Mm.
And learning to be able to take time. My first step was self-awareness, but it is also having someone help you see yourself and help you to put on new glasses that have a new perspective, and really changing from the inside out on what you're believing about you, and how that can change when I very first started speaking, I was in my 20s. I'd get sick, kind of thing, every time before I would go on stage. And learning now, I remember, it's been quite a few years back, but before COVID, so at least 5 and 6 years, I remember standing on a stage and going, "You are having a ball. When did this happen? When did this happen that you were having fun doing what you used to throw up trying to do?" And it all changed with the way I looked at myself, what being visible meant to me, which is a whole lot of public speaking. It's one of the
Mm.
reasons why one of the things people fear the most is, what does being seen mean? And if it means I'm most likely going to be rejected, which is one of our biggest fears, is not belonging, then I'd rather die
Yeah.
than, than do that. So really learning to work, and to work with someone that's going to help you be the best you today and a better one tomorrow,
Mm.
so that you can walk with joy and expectation of good in things, and love being the center of it all, that you are loved.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
we can really comprehend, which I don't know that we ever will, how much God loves us, it can change everything in all of the perspectives, because I can give my husband permission to have a bad day. I'm still God's beloved. And
Yeah.
understanding all of that, it changes the way you operate in every area of your life.
Mm. So good there. And it really goes back, full circle where we start talking about it at the beginning about knowing ourselves. And
Mhm.
and one thing I think about with that too, especially when the speaking realm, a lot of times I find that we feel that we can't speak on a subject even if we know it a lot, because the more we know about this subject, the more we realize how much we truly don't know. And so we feel like we're not an expert anymore when we actually are an expert. And most people that are trying to learn from us need the basics. They need the milk, so to speak. They don't need the meat yet. They need the basic things. And that's what we can teach them. And a lot of times I like to think, especially from a speaking perspective, to speak on what you need. If you knew this 2 or 3 years earlier, that's the thing that you can speak on, like what you started
Mhm.
doing 2 or 3 years ago, your perspective, what you learn, what you know now that 2 or 3 years younger self could have really benefited from. That's the stuff that you can talk about. But the basics in your expertise is what for most people is almost going to be on the cusp of being too much for them. Like it's a little
Mhm.
bit too high level even for them and everything. But really at the end of the day, just really knowing yourself, self knowledge, self understanding, is what I'm getting from what you're saying here, and everything. So they are really having that perspective. And of course, if we can have that outside person helping us, that helps out a ton. But I think even then, just trying to have that 30,000 foot view, think about what's this other person thinking about me as well. How would they react in this situation? I know for me to become more of a happy, more positive person instead of a negative Nancy, that's a lot of what I started thinking about. Like, okay,
Mhm.
do people really like me when I'm negative like this? Are these those
Mhm.
things? And it takes a lot of skill to have that self awareness and everything. But
Mhm.
when I started thinking more about, okay, what do I need to do to be the person that people like, that people want to be around and stuff? And what are the things that I'm doing right now that people don't like? And same thing when I got in and started to try and find my wife officially was, one of the things was a religious thing, but what are these other things that a woman would want to marry me for? What
Mhm.
qualities do I need to have to be worth marrying? And I started to work on those and
Mhm.
building myself up and everything. Of course, it was things that I wanted as well. It didn't,
Right.
wasn't
Right.
necessarily about what a woman would want per se, because I also need to be happy with myself and what I have and what I'm doing and all that stuff too. But
Mhm.
I still thought about that end goal and everything. So really having that self awareness is an important thing to be able to have that self reflection and that perspective shift.
One of my favorite chapters in a book, and it's Stephen Covey's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It was chapter 2. It has affected my whole entire life, and it is called Begin with the End in Mind.
Mm,
And it's kind of creepy, if you will, because at the beginning he has you attend your own funeral
mm,
in the book. And it's like, so what are somebody people going to say to you about you? Who's going to be around? Who's going to be surrounding you? And what are they going to say when you've passed? And then begin to live so that people say what you want today
yeah.
and to be who you are, who you really are, and to upgrade that. And so that's what you were doing when you were talking about I want to have a great relationship with a woman. I want to be married. I want to be a good man. I want to be a good husband, perhaps a good father, and all of those things and what that looks like. When you were talking about speaking, we often minimize the amount of information we actually know, and well, everybody else knows more, or that kind of stuff, and we minimize what we know. But it is one of the things I have discovered over the decades now, is that sometimes we need to be told what we already do know, because I'm not implementing it, or I forgot
Yeah.
to. I used to, and I quit.
Yeah.
Let's take devotional time, or let's take declarations, or let's take taking care of my body. I used to exercise, quit, or whatever. And so all of these things that we can forget, that's important to us. And so always just come and share whenever you're speaking. Share what you know from your heart and pray that it blesses someone. You're not responsible for the hearers.
Hmm.
You're only responsible for the delivery and for giving
Yeah.
what you know and allowing it to bless people, whoever it may, because how it hits them, or how they receive it is a better word, is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to share what you know with love and help as many people as you can from that place. And when we go into, well, they didn't sign up for my book, or they didn't sign up or whatever it is that you were speaking for, is the expectation didn't happen, then we go back and say something's wrong with me. And that's not necessarily the case.
This has been great, Donna. I appreciate so much of this conversation. This has been a lot of fun. I think my favorite one was the fact that we talked about the hamper that was not able to be filled with socks and everything. I think a story so true to so many households for sure. But I appreciate the time and all the value that you brought here. If people want to reach out and follow you, where's the best place for them to do that?
I am on social media, of course, and my name is unusual, so it's easy to find. And my website is the letter I, vibrantliving.com. And on my homepage, I have a free guide called Renew, Thrive, and Recharge, and it's secrets to vibrant living. And so that is available. It's a downloadable PDF that I'm giving away. So if that can bless anybody, take advantage of it. It's on my homepage.
Awesome. Well, Donna, once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We truly appreciate it.
My pleasure.